Hi, and welcome to the Milstrip Mike channel. Today I want to talk about what looks like two nearly identical rifles, and for all intents and purposes they pretty much are, but I want to talk about the Springfield 1903 and the 1903A3. A little bit about history, a little bit of background. The reason that the 1903 was created was in the Spanish-American War. Soldiers went to war with the Krag-Jorgensen, or single-shot trapdoor. They had the Krag-Jorgensen magazine, which had the Krag-Jorgensen rifle, which had the infamous box magazine that you just topped off one at a time and at a certain angle. And it also shot a round nose 30-40 cartridge, which I mean, if you're just going out and about, going hunting, I mean, this is actually a nice rifle to take. But for military purposes, it was almost obsolete when it was created, because it couldn't withstand really any more pressure than what the 30-40 had, so it was at an evolutionary dead end. Plus, during the Spanish-American War, during the Battle of San Juan Hill, 750 Spaniards held off 6,600 American troops trying to get up the hill. The Spaniards had imported German Mausers that were stripper clip fed, and the Americans just had Krags and trapdoors. So, and basically the Americans finally won the battle when they brought in a Gatling gun and some artillery, but that made a huge impression. Basically what I want to do here is just shoot 5 rounds from a Krag already loaded, reload, shoot them again, and then compare that with shooting from the 1903 using stripper clips, just to show how much quicker the 1903 was and how much of an advantage it was over the Krag. I'm only shooting about 50 yards away. I'm just doing this to show the reloading process. Granted, I've had no training by any means, but as you can see, it was kind of awkward, especially when you're in a hurry, trying to get those individual rounds into that box magazine of the Krag. Now let's try the 1903 with the stripper clips. And one thing I mentioned on the tabletop about the magazine cutoff, got to make sure that this says on to make sure that magazine cutoff is actually turned off, or else this is a single shot rifle, pretty much. As you can see, reloading with the stripper clips was much simpler with the 1903 than fiddling around with those individual rounds in the Krag. They decided to kind of copy the Mauser, and as a matter of fact, the United States paid Mauser royalties until World War I, and even after World War I believe they settled with Mauser finally, so they didn't have to pay royalties anymore. But they created a new rifle in 1903, it was adapted in 1903. I think it mainly came after the Spanish Mausers though, because you can definitely see some differences between the Gewehr 98, which countries who had the Gewehr 98 didn't let them go. So I believe it's probably after, I believe it's the 1893 Spanish Mausers, the 1893 Mauser that this pretty much copied. It shot a cartridge called, they made a new cartridge for it too, called the 30-03. This was a round-nosed, heavy bullet, like 240 grains, and you know it didn't have a very flat trajectory, but it was on stripper clips. But this bullet wasn't very good, so in 1906 we got the venerable 30-06, which is a lighter bullet, Spitzer bullet, so a lot more aerodynamic, a lot flatter trajectory. One thing that was added ridiculously was the magazine cutoff. For some reason, ever since the Civil War, people in the Ordnance Office thought that American soldiers would waste bullets if we gave them the ability to have more firepower. That's why we didn't have That's why they didn't have mass production of Henrys and Spencers in the Civil War. That's why we had a single-shot trapdoor rifle, even though Henrys and Spencers were available, and Winchesters a little bit later on. It's kind of how, kind of what ended up defeating Custer was the Indians had Winchesters, Custer had single-shot trapdoors. They're doing excavations right now to find out how many of the lever rifles the Indians actually had. But anyway, it had the magazine cut off, and basically soldiers were supposed to, you know, charge the rifle, turn the magazine cutoff on, and use it as a single shot, and only dip into your reserve as an emergency. Of course, when World War I came, they found out how ridiculous that was. Up until World War I, Springfield Armory pretty much produced most of the United States rifles. I mean, there's been some contracting out when wars happen, but when the United States entered World War I, we were woefully short on rifles. Several other manufacturers, such as Remington and Winchester, and Eddystone, I think, was a subsidiary of Remington, were making the British were trying to develop a replacement for the Enfield rifle, the P14, and since the factories were already tooled up to make this, they found out that it was a lot easier to change the caliber of the P14 to 30-06 or 303 than to retool these factories to make Springfield 1903s. So during World War I, the United States had two main rifles, the 1903 and the P14 was actually renamed the P17. Even though it isn't an Enfield, we called it Enfield. And actually, since there were three different factories making the Enfields and the Springfield, you had about 2 to 3 times more of the P17s than you had the 1903s. Just for comparison, I've placed my P17 next to the 03 and the 03A3. When it comes to shooting them, mine is an Eddystone, by the way. When you're looking for them, they're usually Eddystone, Remington, or Winchester. When it comes to shooting them, I love shooting the P17. You have the slight pistol grip on the stock. The sights are a lot better than the original 1903. It's a heavier rifle. It's just more enjoyable to shoot, a lot more accurate with it than the 1903. But World War I ended. And one thing that kind of got thrown into the ash heap of history because of World War I ending sooner than most people thought it would was the Peterson device. One of the complaints about the 1903 is it wasn't very good for storming the trenches. So this ordnance guy, I'm not sure if he's ordnance, but anyway, Peterson, and he later entered a rifle to compete with the Garand when the U.S. was looking for a semi-auto rifle. But Peterson basically made this device. If you look for 1903s and you see a 1903 Mark I, it'll have a little cutout in the receiver. You can usually find these for between $1,000 and $1,500. But this means that this rifle was made for the Peterson device, which basically you took your bolt out, you put the Peterson device on, and it shot a .30 caliber pistol cartridge, but it was semi-automatic. It stuck out. I mean, it stuck out like this, about this far off the rifle, but yeah, it would have probably been a pretty good weapon in the trenches. The United States kept it top secret, and they were going to unleash it in 1919 to kind of counter the German shock troops and stormtroopers. But you know, the war ended, and it was still under top secret. And in the early 30s, I believe 1932, since we already had a semi-auto rifle in the pipeline, they went ahead. The Peterson device was still, I guess, labeled top secret, so they just decided to destroy them all in one big bonfire. And very few survived. And you got to keep in mind this is 85 years ago. So they destroyed them in one great big fire. And so Peterson devices are very rare. And as I said, the rifle will cost you $1,000 to $1,500, the Mark I. But if you find a Peterson device, the last time I seen one for sale, it was nearly $40,000. So, if you find one, you might want to put a second mortgage on your house if you really want one. But the Peterson device didn't come to fruition. After World War I, the P-17 went away, and the 1903 was the main battle rifle until the Garand came into the picture. So towards the beginning of World War II, there weren't enough Garands to go around quite yet. So 1903s were used early on in World War II, and they were used throughout the war. But they kind of quit production in 1903s, and they started rolling out the 03A3, which kind of cut costs on making the 03. As you can see, the biggest difference that most people notice are the sights, which the sights on the 03A3 are closer to those of the P-17. Generally seen as an improvement, it was also a cost-cutting measure, because the aperture sight on, this sight on the 1903, as you can see, is basically part of the barrel, whereas this is just slapped on the receiver. Also, there are several cost-cutting measures, like certain parts were stamped instead of milled. You also have a little different front sight on there. But basically, most people who shot them overall saw the 03A3 as an improvement. And also the 03, although the stocks on mine are identical, you had the 1903 stock, but they also had a pistol grip stock, and then they had I believe it's called a C stock, which is kind of in between, which even made it a little more comfortable to shoot. Now, some of the things to look for when you buy an 03 or an 03A3, you definitely want to take note of the serial number. And on the 1903, the reason this is important is because any serial number under 800,000, there's questionable, the heat treating was questionable on it, and it's basically general knowledge that you're not supposed to shoot these if you get one that's under 800,000. My serial number's in the 900,000s, which puts the receiver being made in 1918. Also, one other date that you can look for is somewhere on the barrel should be the flaming bomb with the date, which, since I kind of got some patina there, it's a little hard to see. But I said my receiver was 1918. My date, I believe, is 10/29. So this is re-arsenaled after the war. As for the 03A3, this one's actually a Remington produced, because I'm pretty sure Springfield was just producing Garands. So, and like Winchester, you got your 4 main Garands: Winchester, International Harvester, H&R, and of course Springfield. So I believe Remington produced most of the 03A3s. This serial number puts this, I believe, 1943, and my barrel date's hard to see on this, but it's 1043, and my receiver date, when I looked it up, it's like either August or September of 43. So I believe my 1903A3 is actually original. And also not sure if you can see it there, but the sight also has a little flaming bomb on it, because I didn't realize that this had the hooded sight on the front, and I thought that was something somebody might have added on, but the little flaming bomb told me that it was it was originally made. So I'm not sure that this gun was ever really used, the 03A3. So it's rather immaculate. Basically, the serial number, barrel date, sights, those are the main things to look for. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.